Nina, thanks so much for hopping on the Next Level Minds podcast.
Absolutely, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited. I know we swim in kind of similar circles with you being in Charleston and me growing up there, and always like to talk with the locals, so this will be good.
This will be fun. Our little Charleston crew around here. Enjoy it.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I have a lot of Southeast demographics, but I got just the sub pocket of Charleston from growing up there, and people still follow me and things like that. So I think people definitely recognize the name, which will be good, obviously.
Yeah. So wait, where you grew up in the Mount Pleasant, that area. So where'd you go to school?
I did. Yeah, I went to Wando High School and then barely graduated from there. I didn't really put school first, but ended up doing College of Charleston Bridge actually for a year and then transferred to Clemson. So yeah, that's kind of my story. But yeah, I went to Wando, which I'm sure you met a lot of
Nice.
people that did as well. So
Yep. No, a lot of kids. My kids were academic magnet. They were nerds, but most of their friends in middle and high, middle school
yeah.
stuff went to Wando. So we were in Mount Pleasant. That was our stomping grounds.
Well,
Well, so good to get to know you.
it
Yeah.
used to just be Wando, and now there's like Oceanside and all these random high schools
Lucy
popping up.
Beckham.
So
And yeah.
yeah. So but no, this will be a solid episode. I think a good spot that I want to start, and I always love speaking with current as well as past athletes because it's just so competitive and the discipline and the commitment that it takes, which really transpires to probably a lot of the success that you've been able to build today.
Yeah.
But I would love to start LSU gymnastics. What were some learning lessons with that, and maybe some things that kind of help shape to the success you've been able to build and continue to build today?
Yeah, I think sports plays such a big role in so many of our upbringings, and then it continues to carry through in the rest of our lives. So I was a gymnast, and I was actually on the U.S. gymnastics team in the '80s with Mary Lou Retton and that Bart Connor and that crew back in the day. I was on the U.S. team, but then I didn't make the Olympics. First big failure after being on the cover of magazines and stuff, like as an Olympic hopeful, and then not making it. So shame, embarrassment to go walk down the halls of my high school after everybody knew, I'd moved away from home and been training in a center. So it was a big deal. And then I regrouped and I went to LSU, D1 school, great program. Very fortunate to have the opportunity to compete for them. I was one of the top recruits in the country that year. And then I blew out my knee my
Mm.
freshman year in competition. And so I went through a big transition then about, who was I without my sport? Back then it was like not me dating myself, but it was like your bumper sticker and it
Yeah.
was it was your sweatshirt, your bumper sticker, and your baseball cap that had gymnastics on it. Now it's your Instagram, it's your TikTok, it's how you identify. So losing that identity was tough, but there's something about sports, any sport, that winning and losing and failing, and with gymnastics specifically, being able to get back up and keep going, sometimes literally landing on your face and then having to get up and smile and keep going. That's the early age of my resilience, my ability to continue to find a way forward no matter what. And I always said, even when I got into corporate many years later, I would hire an athlete any day. Those skills you have, you're coachable if you're an athlete. You don't crumble when somebody tells you like that wasn't quite right, do it like this. You're coachable, and you can see the playing field. You can adapt. Like if you step on the field and it's rainy or different or something different, you adapt. And so same thing in corporate, their ability, an athlete's ability to adapt. All of those things, and the discipline it takes to be an athlete and the time commitment that you put in, all of that carries over into adulthood and into many careers down the road. It's still very much a part of you. Yeah.
Yeah, I loved what you mentioned about the coachability component. I think something that I see a lot of younger people especially struggle with, because I do some coaching for young professionals, is that they're not willing to accept feedback and learn from it. It's kind of a mentality of, well, I already know this, or you don't need to tell me that. So maybe if somebody's struggling with that, how can you get to that right mindset where like feedback is good and I need to be coachable? Because I think that holds a lot of people back.
Oh, absolutely. We only learn from what we do wrong,
Mm,
not from what we do right. And once you can get that in your head and go, it's a gift. Feedback is a gift. Coaching is a gift. Yeah, you want to be good and you want to, step in and, fake it till you make it and all those things people say. But if someone gives you feedback or coaching and can make you better, I mean, you don't want to stay the same. and you want to continue to learn and grow and get better and be more, add more, do more, make more money, whatever it is you want, the more in your world, you got to be able to take some of that in, and that's how you improve. That coachability, that ability to make a change and do things differently, to let people teach you. I look at everything still curiously and want
Mm.
to learn more.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think it's having that I forgot the quote, but it's basically like you're never too young to teach and never too old to learn
Yeah,
type mentality, right? So
so
love
good.
that you mentioned that. Um, be very curious, what got you from that, gymnastics, sports landscape to getting into news, reporting, and getting your face on the lovely televisions that are out there?
Well, I did that for years. So when I first blew out my knee in college, this is actually a fun story. When I first blew out my knee in college, I'm at LSU, and
Mm,
the PMAC, the Pete Maravich Assembly Center, is where they put me. So I had to work for the athletic department in order to keep my scholarship.
mm.
So they had me doing laundry. I was working in the laundry room, and not like washing cute little gymnastics leotards. No, jock straps and
Oh.
football and basketball, like working in the laundry room. It was horrible underneath the PMAC. Um, and I used to joke, my claim to fame was almost what could have been, I washed Shaquille O'Neal's jockstrap. But there's a little bit of
That's awesome.
crossover there. He was actually a couple of years, like there's a couple of years overlap there. Anyway, but I was working in this laundry room, and I really had never thought about, you know, life after gymnastics. It had been my whole life since I was
Mm,
4. I'd been training to be a gymnast. It's how I saw my future, at least the next 3 years of college. I hadn't really planned past that. And I would sit outside that laundry room every day and just kind of, lean up against would crutch out there and then lean up against the wall to get some sun and hang out. And all the other athletes are walking to practice, the track and field's there, the baseball team, everybody's coming from training rooms and stuff. And it was a real hub right there, and no one talks to the injured girl leaning up against the wall, because one, that's a sign of what could happen to you, and two, I was probably not real pleasant to be around. I was the one who like took my, you know Percocet with my shot of Jaeger in the morning and was just trying to get
That's
through.
so
I didn't
funny.
make all good choices. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's awesome.
Anyway, so I would sit there every day, and one day this academic advisor guy, who one of the academic advisors, walked by for the sports department and said, "Hey, how you doing?" And I'm sure I said something really snarky like, "Great, can't you tell?"
Yeah.
But he started stopping by a lot.
Mm,
And then he one day finally sat down and got me to really talk and said, "Well, what do you want to do uh, after gymnastics?" And no one had ever asked me before, ever.
mm.
That it wasn't like it is now. There's no mental health counseling or planning
Yeah, yeah,
like it
yeah,
is now, and
for sure.
those big D1 schools. No one had done that back in the 80s. So he asked me these questions and kind of got me in a new direction, and I found television through him. He said, "What if we got you a job in sports information?" He's like, "You're well liked. You could interview all the other athletes for the TV stations and for the newspapers and stuff, and all the minor sports." So I started off being in sports as a sports reporter, and I interviewed the other gymnasts and volleyball players
Mm,
and track and field, national champions in track and field and national champions in women's tennis or golf or whatever. They were there. So I started doing all these minor stories for the local TV station, and for local newspapers and stuff. And then I got my first job in television after that. And it just launched me. And after a while, I went from sports to politics, and then I went from
yeah.
politics to general assignments, and then I got a job that got the big chair, as they say, and I got the anchor job later in life.
Yeah. So when you got into that anchor role, were you, you know, kind of already equipped of like, oh, this will be good, or were you like a little nervous that you were moving up? Like, did you ever get imposter syndrome? Because I know a lot of people can get that in their day and age right now.
Oh, so much, and I was so bad. I go back and look at tapes now. I was such a baby. I was so bad at it.
Yeah.
Luckily, back in the day, I had a co-anchor. His name was Dan Ashley, and he was a seasoned professional, and he would coach me. I was
He'd
coachable.
he'd carry you on it, I
Yeah,
guess.
and we would
Yeah.
sit down after the newscast, and he would make me watch myself, and he's like,
Mm,
"Why is your hand doing that stupid thing? And why are you sitting like this? And why did you say that?" So I learned quickly. But of course, I had imposter syndrome. I was 27 when I got the main anchor gig, and I was a good journalist. I was a good reporter back then. It was fair, balanced, and accurate, and it was a
Yep.
very structured way to be a good journalist. And I loved doing that. I actually didn't want to be an anchor for the longest time. I wanted to be the next Christiane Amanpour and fly around the world and like be a global reporter. But at some point, I had to pay bills. I was
Yeah.
broke, and the money was in the anchor chair, so I went gunning for it, and was very fortunate that our anchor had moved on and had a new opportunity, and so they gave me the chance. Yeah, but
Yeah.
I at first I felt like, why is anyone going to listen to me? And I didn't like the way I looked. I got Charleston's best hair for years. I'm
Oh,
like,
that's
okay,
so
maybe they're
funny.
just watching for my hair, but whatever, I'll take it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're like, that's only a small part of it. Come on, guys, give me some more credit,
Yeah,
right?
use what you got. I was cute back in the day.
Yeah, yeah. So do you still watch the same news channel and kind of throw back, or what was that like for you?
I don't watch local news a whole
Yeah.
lot. I love that. Now I still have dear friends in it, so
Right, right,
I
right.
do watch on occasion. My I married the weatherman, very scandalous. So sometimes we'll watch, obviously during weather coverage and stuff. But we're horrible. We'll like pick on them and say things
Yeah.
out loud and do our own, news and weather in the living room, and kind of snarky. But I have such an admiration for it. I do think Charleston really cultivates some fantastic journalists, and there's some strong
Sure.
people here. It's a cool place to live, so you get a higher caliber than most local
Mm.
news. And there's just some fantastic people in the industry right now. Some that I used to work with, the Carolyn Murrays and the Brendans and those folks who I've known for many, many years. I mean, Brendan Clark, who was the news anchor in Charleston, was the intern in sports back when I started here. And now he's a
Wow.
gray-haired news anchor. Yeah, yeah.
That's so
Very
funny.
fun.
Oh my God, that's so full circle. I love it.
Yeah.
All right, so you did that and then you jumped into, was it benefit focus was kind of the next pivot there?
Yeah, so I went from TV to tech, not a
Okay.
whole lot, not a
Yeah.
whole lot, transfers there, but I got to a point where I was ready to, instead of being in front of the camera all the time, take a back seat and have a different type of life. And I thought I could work 9 to 5 and be home for my kids too. I jumped into tech. It was
Yeah.
startup to hyper growth to IPO. There was no short days. But I did something, and for anybody who is going through a change in their career, I highly recommend you do this. I had some good mentors at the time. I talked to my mentors, and then I went because I was going from TV, and I knew I wanted to get out and do something outside of television. And I really didn't know at that point what I was good at. I mean, I knew I was good at television. I had won an Emmy for best news anchor in the Southeast. I had won Charleston's favorite news anchor 10 years in a row. I mean, I knew I was good
Mm.
at that, but I didn't know what else besides sitting at a chair and having nice hair and reading a teleprompter. Like, what was I good at? You know.
Yeah.
So I went and had coffee or lunch and with a handful of people who I admired. Ron Murdy from their PR marketing. I went and had coffee and spent some time and asked him, what would you hire me for if you had to hire me
Mm.
tomorrow? And he was like, I wouldn't because you're not good at this. And then the law firm, Ron Murdy, they
Yeah.
said they would hire me to. We had a conversation about me working with their
Mm.
attorneys to train them to how to work with, uh, television and news and big, global cases that they were having to handle, helping them handle the press around that. So that was one idea. That was Ron Murdy. But the other one was a big marketing firm. I can't think of the name of it now. That's horrible. Senior moment. But I met with them. And the owner of that firm said to me, yeah, you don't know marketing. I wouldn't hire you for anything but maybe to do like car commercials and carpet commercials. And I was like, wow, that's harsh,
Yeah.
but it was true. I didn't know that world. And then I talked to people and I said, if you had to hire me today, what am I good at? You know me. What
Mm.
would you hire me for? And I got very fortunate because at this same time, Google bought YouTube.
Mm.
And one of those conversations led me to, you're really good. So what someone told me is you're really good at taking complex things, like covering a trial for 8 hours, and then giving me 30 seconds to a minute of it.
Mm.
Like you can take really complex stuff and break it down so people understand it. And you do. I mean, one day in news you're covering brain surgery, and the next day in news you're covering a hot air balloon championship, so
Yeah.
or a shooting or a stabbing. I mean, you have to learn something really quickly
Mm.
and then condense it down and make it interesting. So, with that knowledge of what I might be good at, the opportunity came up when Benefit Focus had Goldman Sachs had just bought out their angel investors, and they had an opportunity to look at when Google, and YouTube, that whole transfer of power there. Sean Jenkins, who was the CEO there, and I had a conversation. He's like, "We got to explain healthcare. We got to put video
Mm,
in that. I need someone who can, take high deductible plans and all of the craziness that was the Affordable Care Act and all of that
mm.
back then, and condense that and make it make sense and figure out with our engineers how to create hooks so it's served up in our software when people have the question." So that was a wonderful challenge and exciting new thing. So I had to jump in and learn software, obviously, but the opportunity to be a part of something like that was really, really cool. And one, it excited me. It was certainly, it excited me the idea of doing that. I knew I could do that part well. Learning something new seemed exciting. And then, like so many of us do when we switch jobs and we have choices, I had some options at this point. I followed the money. Where was
Yeah.
money going to be? Healthcare and tech is definitely where the money was. So I went down that road, and it paid off. And it was just an amazing ride to be a part of that group that took that company public.
Yeah, I was gonna say I didn't know you were there because I wasn't really looking at the years in comparison to when all of that happened. So I didn't even realize you were there during all of the craziness of IPO and starting where they were smaller. I mean, I'm sure you saw so much in that career pathway there.
Oh my gosh, when I came on board, I was hired 246. We all knew what number we were back then, so 246 was about where I was hired. And there's a crew of us that all came in at the same time. Again, because Goldman had bought out the angel investors, and so they had some money to hire some new talent and expand a little bit. But when I came in, it was about 250 or so people, and then when I left, it was 1,200 or so.
Yeah.
And I was vice president of marketing communications during the IPO. So I got to help prepare the roadshow deck, get the
Mm.
team ready for the roadshow, go on the roadshow and fly to New York back and forth, work with the Goldman guys on how we were going to present the green pasture that we had ahead and what our story was going to be. It was a really, really cool thing to be a part of. And I had to once again, learn really fast because I didn't know that world at all, at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah. How did you move up fairly quickly? Because I was looking at your LinkedIn and you kind of hopped around between different executive positions, but you obviously don't do that if you don't, know what you're doing. So how did you learn it quickly, move up, and things like that?
I really believe you don't get hung up when you get into an opportunity like that in a hyper growth situation. Don't get hung up on the title. I never
Mm,
cared what my title was. I said, what hole can I fill? So if this department was, flailing, or we were adding a new department over there, I was like, how can I help do that? So I would jump into a new role, not being afraid to let go of the old one, or I would, offer to take on something if someone left. And that became a huge opportunity for me. And I was in the right place at the right time in some instances, and in other ways, I was an easy go-to. I was smart enough to hire people smarter than me all the time. And my ego was always in check. I was fine with not being the smartest one in the room, and I always was curious and wanting to learn. And I went at it with, what do the people around me need from me?
mm,
So on any given day, my like so many of us are taught, when you get into a management or leadership position, your number one priority is whatever your boss's number one priority
mhm.
is.
Yep.
So I prioritized and made sure that I was filling a need every day when I walked in there. So it put me in a position to say, hey, she'll handle whatever we throw at her. At one point, I was standing up new buildings in Salt Lake. They
Mm.
had me out there. I was working on transition teams when the new CEO came in. I ran at one point. I actually had the um, securities teams under me, and
Oh
I'm
my
super
gosh.
anti-gun. And I was like, okay, guys, you're all like, we're gonna sit and have a conversation now because you're all making me really uncomfortable.
Yeah, and you're the one
But
that's like over
yeah,
the yeah, that's ironic. That's
but
funny.
the secret to that success, I think, was just I always surrounded myself with people smarter than me, and I was willing to do whatever it took to make the company get to the next level. I wasn't too concerned about my own role.
Yeah. I like what you mentioned there about just filling those holes because I think a lot of people get hung up on their job responsibilities. Oh, I'm manager of this. Oh, these are the things that I do. But in any business, large, medium, small, there's holes to be filled, and I feel like just like you did, and it obviously paid off. Filling those holes you're going to be noticed by folks that are higher up than you, even if you don't think they're watching, they're watching. And when opportunities open up to go to the VP or MVP or RVP, whatever your company calls those kind of higher level leadership positions, they're going to see your name. So I love that you mentioned there, because that's just validation from what I tell people a lot of times that are, kind of in that managerial, but they want to move up, fill in the holes. They'll see you.
Don't ever say that's not my job.
Yep.
Just don't just and you have us. I watch a couple of people on TikTok and a couple people who say, no, I leave at 5. That's not my job. I'm like, great, but you are not going to move up and move into a really meaningful role if that's what you're doing. If you want to just do that and check out at 5 o'clock, great. But if you want to be a part of something and really be part of growing a company or being part of a team that's making something special in the world, you can't say that's not my job. And it never came out of my mouth there.
Yeah, for sure. So you benefit focus, and then did you just kind of go throughout the IPO journey and all that, and then just shift to an SP, your own firm, or what was kind of that kind of area like?
Yeah, so it was interesting. So I was in my 50s, kids were off at college. We had new leadership. Sean left and Ray came in. We had a whole new leadership team. The big CEO change. And I stayed on for transition management.
Yeah.
People liked working with me, so it was easy to help me, get people on board with the new guy and that kind of stuff. And I really enjoyed it. But then I'd gotten to a point where one, with the IPO, I went from debt to wealth, which was nice.
Mm. Yep.
Kids' schools, all 3 colleges paid for, house paid for, car paid for, even my husband's law school. Like it was a wonderful moment in my life to be able to go from, that debt to
For
some
sure.
wealth. That's what happens with an IPO. I had a lot of shares. So very fortunate set of circumstances there. And then I got 50, my kids were off at college, and I'm like, what do I want to do next? And I didn't feel like I was not part of the new leadership team that was in. So I was there and doing my part, but wasn't as exciting as really being part of building something. And I'm a big fan of startups. I like the startup space where you're building it and growing it. It's a little bit of Wild West and you're figuring it out. Once you go public, you have quarterly earnings calls and you're just part of the machine. It's a little different. And my passion was in more of the startup phase, not early startup. I like startup with money. So it's kind of like that, like all of us. I
Yeah.
like that middle phase. um, so when I sat down and said, what do I want to do next? I had some good advice and read this in a book or heard it on a podcast someplace. They said, if you're not sure what you want to do or what you're good at, print out your calendar and color code it.
Hmm.
And I actually did. I printed out, they said, print out 3 months. I only printed out 2 because it only took that much time. I printed out 2 months of my calendar, because everything's digital now. I actually printed a hard copy of it and I put it on the ground and I took some colored pencils and markers and pens, whatever I had, and I circled in red things that I didn't like to do, in another color things that I really enjoyed doing, and then in orange, which I don't even like orange because I'm not a Clemson fan. Sorry, I went to LSU, wrong Tigers,
Yep.
but it's an orange because I can picture it in my head. And I circled in orange things where I thought I was adding value, like things I'm like, where am I giving back? What really
Mm.
lights me up? And when I looked at all the orange circles on my 2 months of calendars, it was when someone like yourself, like someone that maybe was on one of my teams or younger in their career would book a sink on my calendar and I'd end up in this little glass cube across from some young person who maybe I didn't even, they didn't even report to me, of the 200 or so people at
Yeah.
one point. And they would say, hey, Nina, I hope you don't mind, it took this 30 minutes, because I'd look at them and go, okay, why are we here?
Right. Right. Right.
And they'd say, I just heard you were really good at getting people through tough times. And
Mm.
I'm having this one young man who comes to mind. He's like, my wife's pregnant. I'm having panic attacks coming across the bridge. I'm just freaking out. Another time it was a woman closer to my age who'd lost her husband and said, I just don't know, how to keep going. I don't know what to do. And obviously, first thing in my mind always was, I'm not HR. I'm not in HR. I'm not even
Right.
part of that world. Should I be having this conversation? But I did become known as a person that could help people. And I knew I was saying some things that helped. And I was telling them what books I read and what things I had done when I had, PTSD, and what things I had gone through and how I'd gotten through them. A little bit of stoicism, a little bit of neuroscience. What was it? And it was working. And obviously, because people kept booking that time on my calendar, and that's what ended up with the orange squares around it. Even once in my
Mm.
old neighborhood, a neighbor knocked on the door and he had 2 beers in his hand, tears running down his face. And he said, I just got fired and I can't even go home to my wife. I don't know what to tell the kids. Can you help me? And I was like, absolutely. And we walked through the house and we sat on the end of the dock and we talked through it. And by the end of it, he was like, okay, I got this. I got this.
Wow.
So, so when I stepped away from corporate was when I decided I want to do that, and not just for people who are happen to knock on my door, happen to, be in my company. I want to do that on a larger scale. How do I do that? And what is it exactly I'm doing? I don't even know what it was. So I did the research and I did my homework. And that's when I got to the word resilience after about a year or so. And I wrote my first book. And then I wrote the second book. And I really dove into why some people get stuck or fail when something goes wrong, and why other people not just survive something, but thrive on the other side of it.
Mm.
Like, what is it that makes people, because I did bigger stuff on the other side of each of my failures. I've been fired before, I've been divorced, I've been, I've gone through, many times in my life where things did not go as planned, completely off the rails. And I've managed to not just get through them, but really find big success on the other side.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that. That's such a cool story too, and that's so unique that all these people came to you with just random things and you just became like that person and it
Yeah.
transpired into a lot of the stuff that you're doing today. But let me ask you this, because you just talked about your book, which I assume that book that you're referencing was the This Is Not the End strategies to get you through the worst chapters. I was in an Uber the other day, and this book made me think of this. This guy was asking, what do I do? I was like, oh, I'm in tech sales, but I run Next Level Minds. We coach people, we run a podcast, all this stuff. And then he started going off, oh man, well, let me tell you about my journey. And he basically was high up at this company and got let go, and now he's just driving for Uber, barely making ends meet, which this is him saying this, and
Mhm.
this was 30 years ago that he got fired. And he's like, if that didn't happen, I would be doing this and have this house and see that lake over there, I'd be on that lake. So what did this guy, I mean, like, it's hard to hypothesize, right? Like, I've only met him for 10 minutes in Uber back from the airport and you don't know him, but like, I assume there's a lot of people that have that similar story. If this didn't happen, I would be doing this. So how can you not be like that individual? Or if you're fired or divorced or something just crazy happened, and you don't want it to drastically negatively pivot your entire life, what do you do?
Yeah, that's my whole jam. That is
Yeah.
exactly what I talk about, because some people do get stuck in that, and it can happen on the other end too. There's the peaked in high school guy, that we make fun of.
Yeah.
Even a big win, like I'm stuck in this moment, like
Mm.
at the high school football game. Um, so I've created a framework, and it's a 4-part framework, and it's my own mashup of science and stoicism and um, behavioral therapy, cognitive behavior therapy, and different things that I have learned and done myself through the years and heard from other people. I started talking to other elite athletes, and I looked at companies, and I looked at entrepreneurs, and see why, what did they do that gave them the ability to move forward. And there were some commonalities. So these commonalities are the 4 steps that I put in my framework. And so I'll take you through them. It's
Yeah.
kind of long when I do it in a keynote or in a book, but I'll take it through quickly. And what's really cool is you can do it on a piece of paper. Literally, you can do it on the back of a napkin if you're stuck with something. And so first you draw a line across it, like turn your page horizontal, and then you draw a line across it, and you put 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, all the way over to 10 dots. So it's 100. So this is when you're born to when you're 100. That's your
Mm.
10 dots. So that's your lifetime timeline. And then you put above the line, above about the age where you were, your wins. Like you won a spelling bee, which I never did. I was a horrible speller.
Yeah.
But or you you made a team, or you went to college, graduated high school, graduated college, you got the first job, you bought a house, you got married. All the wins go across the top. What I say is the stuff that's on your LinkedIn,
Mm.
different accolades you might have won, or achievements you've had, or maybe some course you've taken. All across the top, those are your achievements, and you put them roughly where they belong on the dates to that. And then down below the line, so that's the LinkedIn. Down below the line, I call this part the reverse resume. Starting with when your childhood again, you put things you overcome or things that were tough in your life. Maybe you were bullied. Maybe you didn't make a certain team. Maybe you had a horrible breakup. Maybe you injured yourself or lost a parent or lost a loved one or didn't get into the college you wanted to or whatever it is. You put the things you overcame at the bottom, and that's what I call your reverse resume. Um, and on your lifetime timeline. And I like to say every time you got back up over that line from one of those downs, you became more resilient. So the first thing you do is you make this timeline, and then you take a blue dot. I'm big into the blue dot, and you put a dot on that line on where you are today, however old you are. You just put a dot. That's where you are today. And the magic of this is you can see all that you've achieved and all you've overcome. And then there's this blue dot, and then you can see this big blank space ahead.
Mm.
Nothing is on it. It's totally up to you when you put in that big blank space ahead. The story of your life is still unfolding. So that's the T. So it's tips, 4 parts. TIPS, timeline, isolate, people, and story is where we're going. So the timeline is the first thing. And it's put what you're dealing with on that timeline. And say you're dealing with it right now. That's your blue dot. That's your right now, if you're in the middle of one of these. Okay. And now the next thing you go to is the I, which is isolate. So I want you to take your paper and your marker and go on both sides of that line, of that dot, draw lines up and down, horizontal, vertically. So you isolate that dot, not what happened before it, not what might happen after it, but right now is what we're looking at. Because any good therapist will tell you if you're spending all your time in the what happened before, that's where depression lives,
For
in
sure.
the before. And if you're spending all your time in the what ifs and the doomsday scenarios, like a lot of us are right now, this uncertainty going into the fourth quarter, this uncertainty with the elections, uncertainty with the strike that's going on at the ports. With all so much uncertainty right here in the economics, the volatile economics that we're in. So that's if you're spending all your time in the uncertainty and the worry, that's where anxiety lives.
Yeah.
Okay, on that side of the line. So you have this little magic moment when you isolate it and go, what am I actually dealing with right now? Just the facts. Like if I showed you a glass of water, like a glass that had some water in it, would you say it was half full or half empty?
Half full.
Yeah, you're a half full guy. Like you
Yeah,
want to be.
for sure.
I want to be the half full guy too. The reality is it's a 6-ounce glass with 3 ounces of water. So this isolate is like, what are just the facts we're looking at? Let's take our emotions out of it, take out what happened before, what might happen, what are we actually dealing with? That's the isolate. And then I say, draw a circle around your blue dot. And when something happens, you feel like you're in it all alone. If you get fired, or if you get divorced, or if you're in a horrible accident, or you have a death of a loved one, like you feel like you're in it, like all alone. So you draw a circle around it, and this is where you decide who to pull into your circle, because you might who's missing, um, and who maybe needs to be out of your circle. And with this, sometimes I'll have people flip the piece of paper over and go, list your people on one side, who's helping and who's hurting. Just
Yeah.
write down all the people in your life. Even people who are very much love you or in your corner could be hurting at certain times. So in the moment that you're in, who's helping and who's hurting, and you can see that for your who to put in that circle, and then who's missing is who you got to figure out. Do you need a therapist? Do you need a coach? Do you need a mentor? Do you need, someone in your corner to help you? Because what I found in all those commonalities is the people who have big success, they don't go it alone.
Mm.
People who have you can get through something by yourself maybe, but if you want to have success on the other side, people who have big success don't go it alone. Someone sees it differently. Someone can help. Someone it can bring new light to what you're thinking about. Even if you have a great idea, pull somebody in to kind of poke some holes in it and help you forward. So that's the TIP. So it's timeline, isolate, people is the P. We draw a circle around it, and the last part is story. And that's when you take that same piece of paper and you write, this is, and then what are you going to call it? And I use this because, like, this is not the end is my book. And I say, this is whatever you're dealing with is your this. And that's why I use that word. Like, I don't know you, Chris. Like, I don't know your viewers all, like, they all have their own things they're dealing with. Whatever this is that you're stuck in, whatever this is that's a challenge, when you wake up and like, I can't handle this. I don't want to deal with this. This is too much. Whatever this is, you write, this is, and you put at the bottom, let's put some words to it. And with this, I talk about the S part of the tips is the story that you're telling yourself,
Mm.
because the words in your head come out of your mouth and they become your story. So we don't, we have a lot of self-sabotaging language. All of us do. I do the same thing in my head. This morning, I was like, oh, I was just in a bad spot and I was beating myself up about stuff. And we all do it. But the self-sabotage is not helping us. And by self-sabotaging language, that's overgeneralization. This always happens to me. This
Mm.
isn't always going to be this way. It's, and then the catastrophizing. This is never going to work. Things are ruined. Like we take it to the end very quickly, or we jump to conclusions. They haven't gotten back to me, so they must be mad, or they hate my idea. That piece of it, or we can exaggerate. Like I have 5 million things to do. I sometimes when I'm talking to big groups, especially women's audience, I'm like, I have 50 loads of laundry. Who's actually, raise your hand if you've actually done 50 loads of laundry? Like nobody's actually done it. Um, but or we belabor it. Like that's the
Yeah.
other piece of self-sabotage. Like if I just done that, if I hadn't done this, that's part of the going back part. If Bob had done his part, or if I hadn't married that guy, or if I hadn't taken this job, or if I, finished going to school here, it's that belabor. All of those self-sabotaging things, this S part of the story, that's just energy you're using.
Yep.
That's not being used to move you forward. That's just keeping you stuck. So the S part is that language. So we say, is it a challenge? Is it a new chapter? One of the cool things about something big happening in your life is that no one's going to look at you funny if you just completely do something different. If you go, you know what, the new me on the other side of this thing, not the before or after, but the new me is going to be different. I'm going to do things differently. The other day, I joke when I do big keynotes and I have big rooms of people, and a lot of times executives are the ones that sit up front. I'll usually pick out one of them and go, what's your name? And it'll be like, Bob. I use Bob a lot because it's an easy name.
Yeah.
Carl, let's say Carl. Carl. I'm like, Carl, he's probably like the vice president of something. I'm like, Carl in his suit sitting there. I'm like, Carl, tomorrow you could go, hey, screw it. This company, I don't care anymore. I'm going to get a, mohawk and a face tat, dye my hair purple, get a Harley and go across the country. You could totally do that, and they always laugh and the audience gets a chuckle. But you really do. You have control. You could go off the rails. It's your life.
Yeah.
You're in control of it. So I just remind people, like, you're waking up and doing the thing every day.
Mm.
You want to do better, be better, eat right. Like that's up to you.
Yeah.
So the story pieces, the words in your head come out of your mouth and they become your story, and you're more in control of your story than anybody else. So it's neat to think of it this way, that this framework, TIPS, timeline, isolate, people, and story. And the people who get stuck don't do one of those four. You have to do
Mm.
all four.
Yeah.
So if you're stuck in something, you can look at it and go, what am I missing? And I think that if you look at someone who hasn't, failure to thrive or whatever, there's a piece of that they haven't done.
Yeah.
They haven't
Yeah.
gotten the perspective or whatever.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, can you just do one? And then I'm like, probably not. I just want to verify that. But yeah, it,
No.
it sounds like you gotta timeline, isolate people's story. And I loved all of them, honestly. But I think my favorite one was probably the story. Like, I'm a big component of, you are what you tell yourself. Your thoughts become your reality,
Yep.
and you're also in control, like you said, of your story. I always tell people, control the controllable. You can control. You may not be able to control that you just got fired in this example, but you can control your habits, your routine, the behaviors, the action steps that you're taking. No one's forcing you to sit on the couch all day and mope around. That's you, the story you're telling yourself. Just push through it. As Dory says in Finding Nemo, just keep swimming, right? So
Well,
just
that's the
that
stoicism
mentality.
piece. Like that's
Yeah.
the stoic. You have control over your reaction.
Yeah.
You can't control if you get fired, but you do control how you react. One of the examples I always use is you get fired and then somebody calls from the office or from your group to see how you're doing. And you're like, I can't believe they fired me. And so doesn't do half the work I do. And I'm so much smarter and better and screw them. And, um, you know, good luck. Y'all are never going to make it without me. Like you go down that road. And then that guy hangs up the phone, turns around, and they're like, "Hey!" Everybody in the room goes, "Hey, how is he doing?" And they're like, "He is not happy." Same phone call.
Yeah.
You pick up the phone and like, "Hey, how you doing?" He's like, "Well, I didn't see that coming, and don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm still reeling, but I'm gonna need something. If anybody knows anybody who's hiring, I'm gonna need something. And good luck to you guys. I wish you all the best. Like, I know it's a challenge there, but." And then you hang up the phone, and then people say, "How's he doing?" And then the story is, oh, he's, reeling, but, and
Yeah.
he didn't see it coming, but he's looking, anybody knows of anything. You want to be that guy. If you want to continue to have success and go down the road, people want to be associated with that guy. People want to, put that guy out there to find a new job. The guy who is, pissed off and talking crap about everybody, no one wants to be around them, much less hire them.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And I think it's very important not to burn any bridges because you never know, this person that fired you, they could jump to another company and now be interviewing you down the road or something of that nature. And you kind of touched on this too, but make the most of the opportunity. I read about this story during COVID of this guy that got laid off. And then he's like, well, I don't need some money. I'm just going to start cutting some yards for people. And then it spun into him doing some repair works. And then he literally, like, I read this story a couple months ago, so it was like the whole timeline. He started this company, basically scaled it, and then sold it off, a couple months ago for like millions of dollars because he had a landscaping crew, repair work, like
Wow.
contracting work. And I'm like, wow, he got fired from like it was like some middle management job, and then probably making only like 100 grand. Started this company, probably was able to pay himself at a great salary, sold it, and it's like, wow, he turned that opportunity where he probably thought, I'm so screwed for a second. It's COVID. No one's hiring to, I'm going to start this, scale it, sell it. It's like you never know what happens when one door closes. A bigger one could open for you down the road.
Yeah, and it's an opportunity to, like, just recreate yourself. Do
Yeah.
something totally different. Well, my son had Tommy John, who's a baseball player, and he had Tommy John, and so we played some D3 ball, but blew his elbow again, and he was so disappointed at the time. I can remember seeing his sweet face. We were on the back porch, and he was just like, "Spent wasted my whole life in a stupid dugout. Like, I can't believe I didn't do anything but play ball all the time." And I knew in my heart that he would go on and do something else. And I didn't say it right that moment, but within a few weeks when he was, I gave him some time to kind of sit in it and be sad with him. And I said, you're going to decide to be great at something else,
Hmm.
and you're going to be great at it when you decide what else you want to be great at. So sooner or later, you'll find something else you want to be great at, and you have the discipline from being an athlete. Back to where the beginning of our conversation
Yeah.
was, you have the discipline and you have the drive and the focus, and you're coachable. You're going to find something else you want to be great at, and you're going to be great at it. And right now he's going to graduate from med school soon, and he's doing fantastic, and he's going into neuro, like, he's great at it.
Cool.
But at the time, he couldn't even imagine life without baseball because it was his whole world. So like you said, exactly what you said. You create your own reality. The words in your head come out of your mouth, and they become your reality. You're facing a challenge. It's a challenge. It's not ruined or awful or terrible. Like, it is a challenge you're facing, or it's an opportunity, or it's a chance to reinvent yourself. Think you just to think about the world in a new way. And
Yeah.
not everybody gets that chance. Some people stay in the same job for forever because they never are disrupted.
Mm.
Disruption can create some really, really cool opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, especially nowadays, I feel like people hop around with different jobs. And I mean, that can be looked at as a blessing if you're actually, developing your skills. You're not just hopping around to stay here. You're hopping around to kind of scale up. I mean, you obviously did it with benefit focus and jump to starting, NSP. So you've taken
Right.
each opportunity you've had, whether it was LSU gymnastics to competing at a higher level than that, to news anchor, to it's just about moving up in a variety of different things there. So before we jump off, though, I want you to touch on your upcoming workshop that you have. And then I also want you to touch on, best places to connect with you. If there's people that are like, whoa, I need Nina as a keynote like tomorrow. Where can people find you? All that great things.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to share that. This has been a fun chat, Chris. Uh, to hire me to speak or to get in touch with me around all that, you can find me on my website. It's Nina Sossamon-Pogue. But you can also reach out to me through LinkedIn. I do a lot of the professional speaking site connecting there on LinkedIn. You can find me there pretty easily. And then if you want to follow me on social, I do daily motivation. I say motivation's like a shower. You need some of it every day.
Yeah.
It wears off. Inspiration is kind of planting the seeds for a long term. That's more of a keynote. But I do daily motivation, and I put some humorous things on there. I think I'm friggin' hilarious, but I'm not everybody's cup of tea. But I put some fun things on there too, just to give you a chuckle in your day. But you can find me on Instagram or on Facebook, and on TikTok and different places. My team has me doing all sorts of fun things. Instagram, I'm more comfortable with, but I do have some new video and TikTok stuff coming up. As far as my workshop goes, we're launching it at the end of the month. It's October now. So at the end of this month, we will be launching it. It's called the Now What Workshop. So when these now what moments like, hey, I just got fired. Now what? Oh, I just, you know, blew out my knee and I'm an athlete. Now what? I just gone through a divorce. Now what? So it's this now what workshop for anything that's going on in your life. And some of this is for like public shame. Like I just made a complete ass of myself at the company party. Now what? Like I can get you
Yeah.
through those too. So it's the Now What Workshop, and it's going to launch at the end of this month. And it's on nowwhatworkshop.com, and it'll be right there. You can find it. And that's a quick online, low barrier to entry, quick tutorial with me talking and some worksheets and stuff to get you through whatever it is that you're going through. If it's really serious and hard, I got you. And if it's something you just need quickly to move forward, I got you too.
Yeah, I was gonna say Christmas parties are right around the corner, and there's usually a few HR violations at those things, so it'll be good to have
Many.
that workshop.
Yes, yes. Or some frat party. Sometimes college kids like frat party, make a complete ass of yourself and like, don't drop out of school. Take my workshop, keep going, you'll be fine. That kind of thing. Yeah.
Yep, yep. Awesome, Nina. Well, this was a fun episode. I love talking with you. I know the listeners got a lot of value, so thanks again for being on the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Chris. And I'll leave your listeners with one final thought. It is okay to not be okay,
Mm.
but it's not okay to stay that way. So it is up to you to figure out how to get yourself forward. Okay to not be okay, not okay to stay that way.
I
Thanks for
love it.
having me, Chris.
I love it. Thanks.